Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the creative space again. I have my first ever guest. I'm so excited to introduce you to Bertie Brosnan, um, author, filmmaker, Irish historian. Bertie, welcome to the creative space.
Thank you so much, Bobby. And it's an honor to be your first guest. I'm going to be honest, it really is, because I'm a big fan of your work. I've commented quite a few times on your videos, what you're doing, especially lately around your work towards the ancient sites of Ireland. I really am a massive fan, and what you're doing is very important. So it is an honor for me to be here as your first guest.
Yeah, and I think one of the main reasons I wanted you on as a guest as well is because we touch on a lot of the same topics, but I think we come at it from different perspectives or different angles. So my whole thing with Irish history came from the spiritual side, where I was always into other realms. I was always into energy and different things like that, unseen energy. And that actually led me towards the Neolithic sites of Ireland and the ancient history of Ireland. So I'm definitely more of a learner, a novice when it comes to the kind of history and the facts about it. While I always was kind of exploring these places, but I'm doing so with kind of more of an intent now to uncover a lot of things. Whereas I feel like your work is you have the kind of the facts, the knowledge of Irish history, not just ancient Ireland, but more recent Irish history as well. So I feel I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you're coming at it from a pure history loving perspective and you're starting to find maybe magic and energy from that side of it, whereas I'm coming from the magic and energy side, starting to find the historical facts and learning that way. Would you think that'd be the
Yeah,
case?
definitely. There's definitely a lot of truth in what in what you just said. I would say when I was younger, though, I was more inclined to kind of be, immersed in the kind of more kind of magical stuff. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like the kind of, the little bits of folklore and stuff you pick up along the way, as an Irish person, you know what I mean? Just to kind of, even the kind of ghost stories, the supernatural stuff, the little stories you hear about little places and stuff. So that obviously, as a child, that was more my kind of, obviously that was more my kind of interests. History didn't really do it for me, like especially in school, because the way they teach it and stuff. Um, but later in life, from around 2014, 2015 is when I started becoming massively interested in history. And it was all because there was a period of time where it was being either talked about or happened for 1 year where they were taking history off the mandatory subjects for junior such students in Ireland. And even
Oh,
Michael D. Higgins, our president, came in and was like, what the hell? Like, you know what I mean? And I'm not too
wow.
sure how it all played out. Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. It didn't play out in the end. And I got very afraid of that. I was thinking to
Mm.
myself, wow, like, even though I didn't like history at school, it's still vitally important. Like obviously
Yeah.
there was elements that I loved. That's where my kind of interest started. And I guess that's what you're picking up on, is that that's kind of where I went into the historical records onwards.
Yeah.
But in recent times, since doing the work online, I've kind of gone into the mythical stories of Fionn and the Fianna, Queen Maeve, the kind of typical examples, and that's kind of where I've kind of come back into it. So it's interweaving it as well, because I just one last point. It's like I believe this is it's not that I believe, it's just like apps. It must be real. It is real. Like I would imagine the likes of Brian Boru listening to these stories, just like we're listening to the stories now, except they were probably more raw and maybe closer to the truth then,
Yeah.
So he was inspired by these myths as well. So that's how I kind of view the timeline of events.
100%. It's a cool full circle moment. So when you're younger, into the more, and I think like any child, they're nearly more connected to the mythology, magic, even just playing around in nature. They have that kind of imagination. So it's cool that you're sort of, in a sense, even that's where you started. You're reverting back, and I think a lot of historians they will come towards a point where mythology meets history, and exactly like you said, Brian Boru's the versions he would have been hearing about it much more raw and closer to that time. So
Mm.
when you go back as far as records can bring you, that's when you get to the closest truth. And just any, not even Ireland, but any ancient sites around the world, You look at Angkor Wat in Cambodia or the pyramids. There's a part where historical books and facts can't tell us the whole story anymore, and you kind of you that's when you start to open up to the spiritual, the energy, the folklore, the tales, and all that. So I think it's lovely that you have a lovely balance of the both, because I suppose it's easy for
Yeah,
people to get caught one way or the other too much. It's easy for people
yeah,
to only look at facts and history books, but in my opinion, history books aren't always the most reliable source for a lot of things, because history can be manipulated and changed by the winners of
yeah.
war. They write the history books. So I love what you're doing, and I really. So you had actually a screenplay wrote, and it almost publicized. You're right into the stages of getting it out there, and it didn't happen for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to mention as well, just to be clear as well, what I'm attracted to in history is the stories. Like, I mean, the
Yeah.
facts and the figures are important,
Hmm.
and this can be taken out of context as it has been done in the past, where oh, the facts and figures, of course, are important,
Yeah.
but the stories are what count. That's what keeps people going. But yeah, I'm a filmmaker by trade, like, I'm an actor, filmmaker by trade. That's where I kind of learned about all the video production and writing and stuff like that. I've taken lots of courses and stuff, but I never actually went full time into education for it. So a lot of it's self-taught. So I've written a lot of screenplays. So I started writing the Brian Boru screenplay back in around the 2014, 2015 mark, when I started getting invested in the whole. I felt like I needed to be one of the people that was like one of the people, not just the only one of the people. That's something that I need to be like stress is like I'm not trying to be one. Like there's all of us have to do this. But I
Hmm.
felt like I need to be one of those people that would start actually bringing our stories to life on screen, because I was afraid by what the government were trying to do at the time. So then I started writing the Brian Boru story that I have now, The Forgotten Prince, which is around the time of the Battle of Clontarf, actually the day of the Battle of Clontarf. That's when it all kind of started. And I actually went down and wrote an actual TV pilot script as well earlier in Brian's life, when he was just when his older brother was King of Munster. So I actually have that pilot. I'm going to go back to it and I'm going to rejig it. So then moving forward, I kind of got invested in the whole Brian Boru Battle of Clontarf story again in the last 2 years. And I know Timothy V. Murphy because he's from Tralee. He's the actor that I want to play, that I want to play, that I want Brian Boru to be played by.
Hmm.
Jesus, that was a tongue twister. Didn't need to be. Um, I always joke, if anyone ever mocks my English, I say, well, I am Gaelic after all. Like, the
Yeah,
English
second language.
is my, yeah, exactly. I love messing up the English language every now and again, just to remind myself I'm Irish.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but so anyway, so I started talking to Tim, and I did actually talk to Tim at the time with the pilot, and he wasn't really interested at the time, but he's been watching my work, and then he got in touch with me. He said, you're doing amazing stuff. And I says, thank you. And I says, look, Tim, I'm a massive fan of you. And we started talking. I said, what about the Brian Boru story? And he was interested. So I went away, got the script done. And next thing, I had these entrepreneur guys, like genuine guys that I researched. One of them was a millionaire. He got in touch with me for the last 18 months. And they were talking to me about investing in my work, basically. So this is really, editing the story down a lot, because for time purposes.
Yeah, of course.
So that did materialize into a production, and I got a big team together. Like there was IFTA award winners in there and everything, and we had a team. We were looking at locations. The money was promised, and
Right.
we were actually location scouting with these people at one point. And I don't blame these people, because if they're ever listening to this, they've known that I've said this numerous times. The film business is like this. Everybody understood in the end, but they didn't really get the film business. They were kind of looking for some. In the end, how it all kind of fell apart was they were looking for something more in the beginning, and then kind of releasing more money. And it was like, that's not how
Mm,
things work. They were like, oh,
yeah.
this is the other way we're going to do it. And I was like, but that's not how it works. And they're like, well, and that was it. That's how it all fell apart. So in the end, I was left with the script, King Brian and Brodier, and I had already kind of released the kind of the information about the production and all that. And I said, I had to let my audience down a bit. So I said, how could I actually, appease my audience? And I ended up writing the novella, Forgotten Prince. And actually the novella was amazing because I was able to take the script, which was actually just on the day of the Battle of Clontarf with Brian Boru in his tent awaiting the fate of Ireland. And then I was able to expand that world. And actually his son who survived Donica becomes a real massive part of my story. Actually, the protagonist, Brian Boru, is the main character, but because Donica was outside the tent, you see, so he was going to Leinster, coming back, so he was able to kind of view the whole world around the Battle of Clontarf, for
Hmm.
the days leading up and afterwards. And he took over the mantle of Munster afterwards as well. So it's an interesting story, and yeah, that's where we at. That's where I'm at with it.
An interesting story and one that shouldn't be forgotten. So I love the title, The Forgotten Prince. And also,
Yeah,
so when you were saying how the government, you're talking about that in 24, there it is there.
yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it. Do you have an audio version as well? Do you have it
It's
on Audible yet?
coming.
It's coming.
It's coming. And to be honest, I'm talking with Tim about it. Like, we'll see. It's going to be either me or Tim. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Cool. No, I look forward to that either way. And also, I think it's very important. So you were talking about how the government were talking about taking Irish history off the syllabus, and that's basically
Yeah.
what sparked you to do that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how something that could drastically or have a negative impact actually turns out to be something so positive. It mightn't have given you the motivation to do all these creations, and I think it's really important. Also, I'd love for someone like you who's, I wouldn't even say grassroots, but who's getting like down and dirty into Irish history, going around visiting places as well. I'd love if your work was the one that did make it to the big Hollywood screenplay at some time, rather than
Mhm.
having these big multi-billion production come in. These stories do deserve big budget production, but at the same time, I'd love to see, an Irish filmmaker actually succeed in this like yourself. Would be fantastic, I think, and very important as well. And am I right in saying that you're from, or you grew up in Donegal?
No, I'm from Kerry, Tralee, County
You,
Kerry, but you're kind of right because my ancestors are from Donegal.
you're
So
from the
maybe I
west
mentioned,
either way. I was only
yeah,
the reason I was asking was, do you think growing up around that landscape kind of gave you even more of a love for Irish mythology and
oh,
folklore? Just being
100,
out in the country and being around those
yeah,
mountains, and yeah, you can kind of
100
picture the
million.
stories a lot easier when you're growing up around there.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before, Bobby. My father and was a fishery bailiff, so we used to go back west, the west, back the Dingle Peninsula.
Hmm.
So we used to be actually where the national park. There's actually a new national park being opened up in this area at the moment, the Connor Pass area. So if you're ever going over Connor Pass, over to Dingle, and you look down at the lakes, that's literally where our stomping ground as kids. We literally
Oh,
were.
lovely spot. I know the spot well. It's very nice.
Yeah, that's where we used to fish. We used to go up that river ourselves, like 10 years old. We used to go up night fishing. So we were at the foot of Mount Brandon, and it was like very much, the Fianna kind of lifestyle, just going
Yeah.
out into the countryside and fending for ourselves, no mobile phones. And my father would bring us back there every summer. And actually, we had this interesting experience because there was this French family that we were very close with, and they have a house there now. They're big into fishing and hunting and stuff. So there was this deep connection with the French as well. And then because of the Irish historical connection with the French later on, that I found out later on in life about the French Revolution and how this is kind of going off in a bit of a tangent, but
That's okay.
it's all kind of come full circle in the sense of like growing up around these French and how we were so connected and so close to them and being in this wild kind of place, and there was just all these mad little things that happened along the way that kind of shaped me and who I am. And I think that's why I'm drawn to the revolutionary period of that time as well, the French Revolution, because of my affinity with the French.
Of
So yeah,
course.
it's all
Yeah.
these things shape you, like.
And it's funny when you're in this kind of bubble or circle, you can't really see the broader perspective. When you kind of come out and look back, you realize, oh, there was an influence here, there was an influence there. I never really picked up on it at the time, but it's beautiful the unfolding of these stories. you're making stories, but you're in a story yourself, you know. So that's amazing. I was talking there about how I'd love for Irish mythology to have a full blown Hollywood high budget movie franchise, a bit like the MCU Marvel universe. But then for me, it's a bit conflicting, right? Because, and I'd love to know what you think about this, because as children listening to these folklore tales, like in the west of Ireland or wherever you are in rural Ireland, listening to these stories, you gain an image in your head and a feeling of what it's like. And I feel like it's very precious thing to have. And if it was ever blown up onto the big screen, onto the movies, if it wasn't the way that it was supposed to be in your head, or you know, the way it was supposed to be, or the way you imagined it as a child, would it take away from what it is? I know maybe for Irish people it wouldn't, because we already have that kind of original love for it. But as a broader perspective from people looking at those movies, I feel like it's very easy to mess up.
Yeah, I've thought about all of this so much, and we literally could do a several part podcast on this, but obviously we're not going to do that. But so my thoughts on that point, right, is that I'd rather the mess up Hollywood one first. If there was never anything at all, if there was the choice of nothing or a mess up of Hollywood in the beginning, like a mess up of, say, Fionn and the Fianna or Queen Maeve or something, I'd rather have that because I know for a fact somebody else will come along and put it right.
Yeah.
So let's just say the example of Braveheart, right? This is my big example. It's historically inaccurate, right? But we all love it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? For the most part, we love it. But it's historically inaccurate. It's all over the place, right? But we love William Wallace now. You know what I mean? And they came along and did like a really good version on Netflix of Robert the Bruce, you know, later on. I think it was Chris something. I can't remember his name. He did a great job actually. And actually that was really well done. The battles and stuff like that was really well, you know, they were actually how the battles played out and stuff. So my point is that even if DiCaprio came in and played Baru that time, because he was meant to be playing Baru at one point and they messed it up and stuff like that, it would leave the door it would leave the door open because a lot of people would have watched that, right? They would have said, oh, that's not right. It would have left the door open. It's like the Batman franchise, where I know it's not the exact same thing, but it's like George Clooney playing Batman didn't ruin Batman, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
Batman didn't end with Christian Bale. It's gone on to Robert Pattinson. So it's like we need the Hollywood money, you know? We need the
Yeah.
Hollywood money. Now, you know, so my point is that yes, I get it. It might not be right, and they might mess it up, but there'll be moments in it that's amazing, and then we could hold on to that and go on and do it better next time, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I suppose I'm nearly more almost coming from a protective standpoint where I don't want the
I
magic
get
to be
it.
ruined. And then like it's like I'd like for future generations to be told these stories, to for it to be passed down orally so that they can interpret it their own way, they can have their own visuals inside their own heads of it. But at the same time, if you were to give me the choice, I'd be like, I want to see the
Yeah.
movie. Do you know what I mean? Or even if it was
Yeah.
like, I loved, so my favorite series ever is probably Vikings. I don't know if you watched Vikings.
Amazing. It's amazing. Right up to the
And
Ragnar died, I think it's
yeah,
one of the best. But
that's what
it goes,
everyone says. Yeah,
it's literally like that. That's what happens. Once Ragnar dies and then it just
yeah.
falls off the cliff.
Well,
I
he
don't know
was
how
the
you
series. He was the
he
series. Like
was. It's
it was him.
amazing.
Yeah,
But
but
I
I'd
have a
love
huge
something of
pile.
the same
Yeah.
style. So it's like they say at the start, this isn't historically accurate. It's just
Yeah.
based on historical events or whatever. I think it could be worked that way because you know it's mythology at the end of the day anyway. So it can be interpreted many different ways. But I can
Yeah.
just imagine like the Fomorians being like a Thanos figure. Balor of the Evil Eye is very similar to Thanos when I think about MCU and when I think about Irish mythology. Just that big tyrant, you know. But what's so cool about it is there's so much description and flexibility in the stories that it can
Exactly.
really be done any way. There could be many, many
Yeah.
different versions of it.
Exactly. There's many interpretations, and as well, it's like the thing is, I think, yeah, like I think nowadays there's no excuse for Hollywood to completely ignore the type of voices that are in Ireland already that can come in and help them. You know what I mean? I think it's very difficult now for, say, any production to kind of go in and completely, I want to use a vulgar word, but I won't say it, but it completely decimate like a culture without even getting people involved from that
Hmm.
culture. Like, I think it would be hard for them to completely destroy it and mess it up. I know what you're saying, like where it's a sacred thing and we need to protect it, but I think it would be very difficult for them to completely and utterly mess it up. I just think that they would get a certain amount of it right, that would unlock the kind of floodgates, because we just need the floodgates to be opened, because it's an untapped market. And this whole thing, I don't know if you want to go into this whole area, but this whole, I can't, I just really vehemently against this thing about there's not a big enough market for it. I just think that's
Mm.
the worst excuse in the world. I just think it's the most idiotic and honestly stupid excuse that I've ever heard. And
I
there's
don't.
reasons
I
why.
think if anything, there's a huge market for it. I think
It's
people from
it's
all over the world love learning about Irish folklore and mythology. I mean, I got
yeah,
more American followers than I do Irish followers. Like, and you're
exactly
probably the same.
same, pretty
So
much. It's just tipping over now. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and that's yeah, that's a strange one. I see it coming. To be honest, I do think that it'll get to a point where someone's going to do it. I'm so surprised it hasn't been done already. Especially when you look at Irish actors. Like, there's a huge cast that's already ready to go there, and I'd imagine if it was the right directors or production, that most Irish actors would only jump at the chance to be in like the first Irish
What
mythological
we
series.
what we need is people in positions of power that aren't I'm sorry, but some of the people in positions of power that are Irish, financiers and stuff like that, they're almost. I,
Mm,
I I shouldn't really label them. There's a certain thing I would want to label them, but I should. Let's just say their mentality isn't of a true Irish person. Like let's
mm-hmm.
let's just say me and you and many other examples of other Irish creators online, and then there's many other examples of true Irish people around. They don't have that mentality. They're kind of almost of the British mentality, of the Hollywood mentality, and they actually view Irish, even though they're Irish themselves, they don't view us with importance. They're
Yeah,
still we're the plaything of the world, like we're the thing is, I get why there's all this emphasis on the troubles and the kind of the Northern Ireland situation and all the stuff going on. They love all that. They love us talking about that stuff. They love
mm,
that because it creates more division and it keeps it
yeah,
keeps that kind of mentality going, right? They love the stuff of Colin Farrell and all these people, which I love, and I love these guys as actors going on stupid talk shows and just talking complete superficial stuff. They
yeah,
want us to just keep up at the surface. They don't want to go back. They don't want to go down into the true nature of what it means to be Irish, of the Gaelic
yeah. The real
nature.
culture, where it all stemmed from, the roots
Exactly.
of our culture, and it's very
Exactly.
much government mindset. Um, it's almost like they want us to be a modern European country that we never were. And if you look at
Exactly.
Dublin, you could be in Dublin, especially in a warm day, and you could think I could be anywhere in Europe. I actually
Anywhere
don't
in the
know where
world.
I am. Yeah, yeah.
Anywhere in the
It's
world.
it's like they're trying. I don't know if it's a conscious thing or if it's more they don't like the old ways or something like that. But it's like they're trying to blend us into this sort of modern.
Homogenization.
Yeah,
And that's how I interpreted it at the time when the junior cert thing was being announced. I felt like, okay, they're trying to, and I know people go, oh, conspiracy theorists and label. I'm not into politics. That's why I love your work, by the way. I was meant to say this in the beginning. I love the fact what you're doing is because you're not political,
hmm,
you're not religious, and it's not about saying, oh, politics are bad and religion is bad.
it's just
No,
staying away. Like, yeah,
it's just I'm the same. The amount of times I get called right wing because I talk about Brian Boru, right? It's ridiculous. And the amount of people that get in touch with me that are extreme right wing and whatever, left wing, whatever, it doesn't matter. They're trying to label me. I'm like, I don't buy into any of that crap. You
it's
know,
so
that's the
tricky
point.
because
You
to
know,
be posting about anything on social media is immediately to try to put you into one category or the other. I've
yeah,
posted things that the right wing would love. I've posted things that the left wing would love.
yeah,
But like, and then it's like it's almost like they have that attachment to, oh, he's one of us. And then when you do something that goes against what they are, all of
yeah.
a sudden they hate you. But it's weird because I always it's so hard to be spiritual and not political at times, but I do need to always check myself and just express what I'm doing because I love what I'm doing. Don't get caught up into one way or the other. And I have found that balance recently. But even when I was going around, and this is terrible, sad, like even I was going around to do the handpan tour and going to each county in Ireland, I went to the Rock of Cashel in Tipperary and I had an Ireland flag printed on it
Yeah.
with the triskelion, Agna Corp Anum, it's mind, body, and soul in Irish. But when they see me walking in there with that flag, they thought I was coming immediately before talking to me. They thought I was coming in to do some sort of far right political protest. And it's terrible
Mm,
that our own flag is viewed as such now. Like,
mm,
I
mm.
wouldn't really have much of a, if it's not even the patriotic attachment that I have to what they said to me, but more like it's just strange. I never even seen it as such. I just seen it as this is our flag. I've put a pagan symbol on it to raise awareness for spiritual health, mind
I
health, and
commented
so
on that video. I commented on your video actually at the time, and I said like I support you, like I support what you're doing. I get it. I get what you're doing. And like let's just I'll be clear, just to be not taken out of context here. Whatever political affiliation, whatever religious denomination, whatever people want to do, I always support people where they're at. Like if they want to do what they want to do, that's no problem. If people want to go be activists, if people want to go to church, if people want to, sign up to whatever political group, that's their own business. Just
mhm.
go ahead if it makes you happy, if you're satisfied with that. But don't label me through your political religious lens,
Yeah,
because it suits your narrative, right? That's not to say that your narrative is wrong. You're more than welcome to it. And look, it's none of my business if people want to interpret me that way. If they
yeah,
want to interpret it, and if it makes them feel better about themselves, but don't come at me with that saying that this is what I'm trying to do, because I'm not. And that's I get what you were doing, and it's a shame that in Ireland, right, that you cannot you can't even have an Irish flag now without some sort of
yeah.
label put on it. It's
But
it's exasperate.
even to say that as ourselves, that's almost like a far right thing to say. It's like, that's what they'll say. They'll be like, "Well, we can't even have our own flag anymore because it's viewed as almost racist now." But even for us to say that from a place of authenticity, which we are just saying it like that, we're not trying to cover up any kind of racist agenda
No.
or anything. But we'd still be seen as far right to say such a thing, which is madness at
Yeah.
the moment.
It's madness, and I think that's why as well that I'm attracted to the ancient stories as well,
Hmm.
pre-Norman, pre-Christian. Sorry, not pre-Christian, because I like actually the early Christians. I think they're great. I think they're like
Yeah,
almost like
Book of
enhanced
Kells
good.
era. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. They're kind of like they're kind of like they're like druids, kind of like
it's
essentially,
like
right?
they're the bridge between paganism and Christianity. The early
Yeah,
Christian monks
it's
were very similar to Druidic ways for sure. They've probably learned a lot of things
110.
from them. Yeah,
Yeah, and so that's why I'm drawn to those times. Now, I do think that they did a great service in recording the oral histories, but they also tainted them as well. But anyway, that's another topic. But I that's why I'm drawn to pre-Norman times, is because the political side of things is not there. Now, I do talk about political things of late. I did talk about the guerrilla war during the Irish War. I'm not saying I'm not. I'm a Michael Collins man as well. I'm not saying, the only reason I am is because I just, as a character and as a person and his story and what he achieved, it's more about that rather than what he was, what the political side of it. It's more about the just the raw nature of the man, the spirit of
yeah,
the man, more than anything. But like the point is, like, I am drawn to those times because that there's an untaintedness of the nature of the person that was in Ireland at that time.
100%.
Everything became divided. Like the minute the Normans came in, it just that was the division started then. You know,
Yeah, and it
so
was it was like I think I'm the very same. I have to agree. That's probably why I'm so drawn to that time as well. The ancient times of I mean, you can call paganism a religion in a sense, but there wasn't the same division around religion. And as soon as you bring religion into the equation, that's automatic division right there. That's what politics
100%.
is for me as well. It's just another word for division, divide and conquer, get the people going against each other, and then the government, you can't really see what they're doing too much. But I suppose we have
Yeah,
drifted back into more political kind of things. But you see, it's hard to deny politics when you look at Irish history at the same time, like what you're saying, Michael
yeah,
Collins. Like you want to explore these things as well, like, but it's not as if you
yeah.
have a standpoint one way or the other. You're just seeing it from a neutral
No,
perspective.
exactly. Like when and there's two things I wanted to say. That, like when I talk about the Michael Collins story, like I will defend him, like, But I have actually went on purposely to research Eamon de Valera, and I've actually found that I liked some of the things that he's done, even though I don't like the man, the person that he was. I
Hmm.
still have found things that I really like about him. This is
Yeah,
the point. I really can't stand that kind of attitude. Is like a guy being scapegoated and being kind of like blamed for absolutely everything. But just one thing I wanted to say as well, that there's, if you ever come across this, and I've come across this, is like in ancient Ireland, like say, like not so much in ancient Ireland, but even up to like the Norman times and the Brian Brew times and stuff like that. And we talk about, say, division. There's a big difference between religious and political division, and say like the warring clans of the time. That wasn't necessarily division in that sense. What it was economy. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
The way the way you survived in those times was to, raid and expand and, fight other kingdoms. But there was a huge, and it was like, but it was a clan system. So the unity within the clan system was just unbelievable, like the brand laws and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But then you're warring with the other clans and things like that was a kind of like a symbiotic kind of a thing more than a kind of division thing. And it was like it was more about you sustaining yourself and you sustaining your kingdom and expanding, contracting. It wasn't the same type of division, because you get all this kind of thing with this kind of narrative of like, oh, you were all just fighting each other and killing each other and all this.
barbarians. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. But
yeah.
when you don't, the kind of mindset was completely different. That wasn't,
Of course, yeah.
it wasn't it didn't drive them. What drove them was their instincts,
It was
to survive.
survival over power in a sense. It was just this is what we
Yeah,
do to survive, and it was.
yeah,
I look. I can't speak for the people at that time, but I get the sense that it was nearly like healthier. These battles and wars, they were healthier. It was almost like an over aggressive hurling match. It was kind of like they were
there's
doing it,
rules. There were
but they
rules.
had respect for each
Yeah,
other. Yeah, like Brett and Law, they would have had respect and boundaries,
yeah,
and it wasn't any kind of really malicious tactics going on where you might sneak into the camp at night and murder a lot of people asleep. And it was never the case. And maybe it was, but
There
I
was
get
there was no, there was certainly treachery and things like that, but no, there was sacrilege moments where people, like even Brian Brew had a sacrilege moment. He went on to, now I know what you're saying. For the most part, there was rules of, rules, and there
structure
was
of some sort.
tradition, structure. But of course, human beings are going to do things at times.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm probably going off track, but I just wanted to kind of define that in a sense, or put a kind of a kind of a ribbon on that, where people try to equate the division of now to like the division then. I don't see it that
Yeah,
way.
and I think it's much more out in the open. If there was any division, then it's like, okay, this is our clan, this is your clan, we have a difference, let's sort it out. Whereas
Yeah,
now it's very, very subtle to the point where you don't even know you're getting divided. I think that's the
exactly.
main difference. It's more of a mental warfare rather than physical and out in the open where you can see it. Break there because of the Zoom time limit, so we're good to go again. Um, we were speaking before, actually, I think it was on one of your TikTok lives. And oh, by the way, congratulations again by the book launch. I know I'd like to talk about that first a little bit.
Yeah,
You launched it on the 888, the Lionsgate portal, without
that's
that
right.
lovely cover art as well, without actually knowing. You didn't realize it was the day of abundance for that date, did you?
I didn't. No, I didn't. And sorry, no, if I'm being an absolute,
No,
kind
show it as much as you want there.
of. No, it's beautiful. Actually, it's really well done. No, it's a tad bit pricey for a novella, but it's because it's a different type of book. Like it's a color print. I'm looking up. There's another version up there as well, and it's got loads of artwork in it, specially commissioned map of Clontarf on the fateful day of 1014. It includes the actual screenplay that we mentioned earlier on, King Brian and Broder, and then of course a novella, which is the expanded story of that, and also some notes for myself, and there's a few other bits and pieces. But I definitely think it's worth the money. And yeah, like it's sorry, what was the question?
No, I was just talking about how you released it on the kind of manifest
Yes,
or the abundance manifestation date. So number
yes,
eight
and
is the number of abundance that goes round and around. And
yeah,
actually
yeah,
today is the eight as well. So it's a good time to be promoting it. I just picked up on the time
bro.
of recording is the eight.
I couldn't believe it when I saw because I don't know if it was a post or a story or something. I saw that you mentioned it, right? And I got in touch with you about it. And I actually, it was so weird though, because, and I saw something that you said afterwards as well about it. But I was blown away because I love that kind of stuff. I'm all about the numbers and different things. I was seeing loads of 11s recently before for about a 2 month period. They were absolutely
everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. I was looking at my phone, 11, 11, 11, 11. It was just everywhere. It was everywhere. It's kind of gone away again. But anyway, on your point, the 8-8, I didn't know that at all. So the book was actually scheduled to release about 6 weeks before that date, and I just picked that date arbitrarily. I just didn't. I picked on a Thursday. I was like, I was kind of giving myself enough time to be ready. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I remember something that you said afterwards. I felt dead on that day. Like was it
Yes.
the day of the date, or was
The
it kind
day
of
is
after?
probably the days leading up to it, and yeah, around these times are those times of astrological alignments. It's people's energies are all over the place. So sometimes they can be
Yeah,
drained, sometimes they can be full of beans. It kind of comes and goes.
yeah,
It fluctuates a lot.
yeah. Because I was a bit kind of like I was getting all buzzed up for the 8th. I think that's what it was actually. I was getting buzzed up for it, and on the actual day itself, although everything went well with the launch and I've sold, it's 2 weeks now. I've done quite well. It's close to 40 books sold for a self-published book. It's decent, like. Um, so like on the day itself, I felt completely drained. Like I was just not good. And I was like, oh, what's happened? I thought today was the day of abundance. Like, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
abundance of energy. But
yeah.
I get it. Like it's kind of it's a spiritual thing. We can never fully understand
Mhm.
what's actually happening. Like a lot of the time, it could be a good thing that you're being drained out because you're being, charged up for the future or something to that effect. Like,
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
I just thought it was brilliant that you didn't, and like not many people would realize of that date, but I just thought it was brilliant that you accidentally, I say accidentally,
yeah,
not there's a coincidence, but it's like the
yeah.
subconscious mind actually allowed you to launch it on that date, and that's why you had setbacks and different things coming up along. Some
I
people
actually
live by
think
numerology.
Yeah, I think I did because I knew it was the 8 months. So when I picked the 8, because I'm born 85, 85, right? That's my
Okay,
date of birth, right? So I kind of have this thing with 8, I have this kind of, affinity with 8, 8. So there was a kind of element of that, but it wasn't any sort of, it wasn't because I knew
it
that
wasn't
meant the
really
abundance.
strategic, like it was just somewhere in the back of
No.
your mind. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I didn't know what you were saying about it. That's why I got in touch with you when you said it, because it was kind of cool, like.
Yeah, definitely cool. And just speaking of being drained and energy in different places, I believe we had a similar experience at Gallstown Dolmen in County Waterford. So I was going there for the handpan thing. I was up early that morning at the Rocket Castle, and I went from there to Lake on Scoil, which is the tallest dolmen in Ireland in Kilkenny. And I hadn't eaten much. I was absolutely drained. I was weak as a kitten, and I was just going in, and I was like, I wanted to give it my all. I wanted to play some brilliant music for the place and like bring energy to these places. But I was so drained. I was really weak, and I got in there and I just sat underneath. I sat inside the dolmen for about 10 minutes, and it was like I was after being given about 20 Red Bulls. Out of nowhere, I was just full of energy. I was up. I could feel the tingling around my body. I hadn't, like I said, I hadn't eaten, but there was no effect of that anymore. I didn't feel hungry anymore. It was like the energy of the dolmen of that land was kind of feeding me. And
Yeah.
we had a brief conversation that something similar happened to you. You were kind of down and tired, and then you went there.
Yeah, like it's kind of weirdly similar because I work nights, so I was kind of coming from I was meeting up with my friend Luke Corcoran down there, who's a actually big part of the project as well. He's mentioned the acknowledgement of the book. He's a producer, lives down in Waterford, so he was my guide. So we had kind of did a kind of itinerary and start with the oldest first, like Galsdown, and then we went to Dunhill Castle afterwards. I don't know if you've ever been to Dunhill. It's an amazing place. It's close by actually. So I went in there and I was just I don't know what happened. At first we were kind of having a laugh on the way up. You know the way
Mhm.
there's the driveway that leads up there. It's so weird, like the kind
Yeah,
of the way it's like it's
you
almost like
never,
a person.
you never
Yeah.
think you're allowed in there. It's like a closed off kind of an
No.
area. But then there's a style to walk in past. So I was like, okay, fair
Yeah.
enough. Yeah, I'll go in and on.
Yeah, yeah. Like, but if you're on your own, you'd be thinking, "What the hell is this?" Then, as you say, there's a place to walk through. But like, if you miss
You
that,
never know it. Like, no.
you would never know that. So we're walking up, and actually, the hill of the Hag. you're aware of the Hill of the Hag that's there, right?
Yeah.
So when you look up the Hill of the Hag online and actually try to find information about the Hill of the Hag in the Galstown context, there's nothing about it. Like in terms of there's no explanation as to why it's called that. Now I do know that this is all about the Cailleach, right? Is that the way you
Uh,
pronounce it?
I would say Kailak. Kailak.
Cailleach, sorry, Cailleach.
Yeah.
The hag, right? The hag of
Yeah.
Bera. It takes many forms, right? The Queen of Winter, all this kind of stuff. So I know now that this is where the connection is. You know, Mythical Ireland, actually, Anthony Murphy does a lot on this. So when I look up there, I'm looking at my books, by the way, in case anyone was looking up at the heavens.
He's looking for
So
inspiration.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, so we were having a laugh on the way up. So it was all jovial because we were like kind of because in our mind, like filmmakers, like the Hill of the Hag, and we were pretending we're like in a horror movie, like way like, oh, these two guys come up here 20 years ago looking for the Hill of the Hag and never returned, this kind of stuff. The
Yeah,
B
yeah.
movie horror films. So we're having a laugh. The reason why I'm saying this is just about the energy, the energy that we were feeling on the way up. So it was all jovial. We're getting our cameras out, going in. Now, for some reason in my mind, I assumed we would be going on a little bit of a walk, right? Do you know the way you
Hmm.
go past the second gate? So when I went in there, I didn't expect it to be right there, on my right
Yeah.
hand side. So
Same. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I did not expect it. So I was walking up with the camera, completely just waiting for this 10-minute walk. I was thinking I was going to be going up the hill for some reason. So Luke, fair play to Luke, he didn't mention anything. He just said nothing. He didn't do it on purpose, I don't think, but he said nothing. So next thing, I just walked up and I just went like this, and I was just literally hit with energy, man. I actually
Mm.
was just I was just in a state of shock. It's on camera. I just couldn't stop saying, wow. I was just like, oh my God. It's just this was the way I was for literally 5 minutes straight. Like I just couldn't grasp what I was looking at. It was so beautiful and so powerful and just like, and I know there's probably this, people that listen to your podcast are probably all getting loving this, but there's obviously one person saying, oh my God, they're a bunch of weirdos. But anyway, I stayed true to my own essence, right? It's like it was just
Yeah.
blown away by it. Like I was just like, this is the most wonderful Dalmel I've ever seen in my life, first of all, right? It's one of the most beautiful ancient sites I've ever walked into. And then there was the whole mystery of the Hill of the Hag that was right there as well,
Hmm.
where there was this sign warning there's a bull. So I'm a
Yeah.
Taurus as well, and I was taking all this symbology and I was thinking to myself, all this stuff was going on in my head, like, that I'm not allowed to go to the Hill of the Hag. There's a bull in the way. There's this thing behind me, and I looked, and then I turned around and I looked at the dolmen, and I'm saying, how was it even standing up? Because it looks like it's unbalanced. I don't know if
Every
you know.
dolmen I see, I say the same thing. It looks like one
Yeah,
touch and it could collapse. Like
it's
the
like
one in
that. Yeah.
the one in Carlow is like 150 tons. It's the heaviest capstone there is, and I'm just like,
Wow.
how is that? Even the stones below it, like how are they holding that up? But
How?
it's just like there's one little point of contact in every single one of them, and it's just a fine
Wow.
art of balance that they do it. But even in Galstown, like dolmens are always impressive, but it's the surrounding area when you get in there.
Yes.
It's so enclosed and enchanted and wild and
Yes.
just left alone, and you really do feel like you're stepping into a timeless
Yes.
era when you're in there.
That's something I should say. It's like walking into a fairy forest. It's like walking
100%.
into
Yeah.
a realm. It's like walking into that's the thing that makes it. You're dead right. There's this, it's just green all around. Like our videos from that place is just unbelievable. Like it's just green. It's like Lord of the Rings kind of thing. I hate using like an English story to describe it, but look, in the
That realm,
context
though.
of I love
Yeah.
Lord you know what I mean? That kind of
Yeah.
world, right? So you're walking into a realm. So anyway, to kind of move along, we both kind of went into the Dolmen and we're having jokes as well. Like, we'll end up down at the pub down in Waterford, like, when we walk into the thing. Or I said I was going to go down to Tralee for a while, and like I'll see the parents for a while and come back to you. All these little jokes, like, so the energy was great. So I would say then for the next 24 hours, I was impacted by the Dalman. Now I went on to Dunhill afterwards, and I went on to the Viking Quarter. So we went on a very kind of spiritual journey from 5,000 years right up until 1,000 years ago. Like a very
Wow, beautiful.
sorry, up to about 400 years ago. It was a very intentional journey, you know. So I believe in all these kind of things, like, you know, the way you go on a little pilgrimage and stuff like that. And this was our pilgrimage, and I was taking this very seriously. Like, this is a very serious endeavor for me. You know, I treat these places with profound respect. Even when I'm standing in the middle of Waterford, in the Waterford Triangle, I'm like respecting these places. I acknowledge our ancestors, the people that fought for the ground and the people that built these places and stuff like that. And I'm going to be honest, and I won't go into massive detail. I was going through a kind of a relationship breakdown and kind of a toxic relationship, and it's all ended now since. But I was kind of all over the place, and I just think that that dolmen kind of brought me to this kind of place of breakthrough and breakdown at the same time. Like that night, I did have a bit of a breakdown and breakthrough with this girl on the phone, and there was drinks involved and stuff like that. And I went on this bit of an odyssey myself. I had one too many beverages, let's just say, and I
Hmm.
ended up walking on the phone. I was on the phone to this girl, and I was walking in literally the opposite direction of my hotel for miles. And I was on the phone, and there was all this emotional stuff going on. And this guy stopped, and it was nearly dawn, right?
Mm.
It was nearly dawn, and I was out in the middle of nowhere. And I kind of came to my senses, and of course, people will say it's the drink, and of course, people say that. As afterwards, and I reflected on it, I was saying to myself, the meaning that I got from it was almost like, you know, I was lost in my life with this person, you know what I mean? And, you know, I went literally in the opposite direction of where I was meant to be going. What was
Mm.
actually, you know, where I went to that day was where I was meant to be. But with this person, I was literally walking in the opposite direction of where I should be. And
Hmm.
this guy stopped, this Irish guy stopped, and he was like, "Are you all right?" And I said, "I'm just going to my hotel." He goes, "Where's your hotel?" I said, "Waterford." He goes,
Opposite
"You're
direction,
walking
pal.
to, you're walking to another village, like you're literally near another village." And I was like, "Oh my God." And he dropped me back, and, you know, an amazing person, a good Samaritan, like he brought me back, and he was really nice, and we followed each other since. And I've reached out to him afterwards, said, "Man, do you know what? You've taught me something about kindness. You know, you were just really, you know," because he was going the other way, like he was literally
You
going
didn't
that
have to
way.
bring it. Yeah.
He didn't have to bring me back. So of course, the skeptical will look at that as a kind of a drunken escapade, right? But I don't look at it like that at all. I look at it like this was a mini spiritual experience, you know,
Yeah.
and I got my answers on that journey.
It sounds very symbolic, like physically going the opposite direction to where you're
Yeah,
supposed to be going, being led astray, possibly a bit of a stray
yeah,
put on you. And no, I know what you mean because we've all been drunk, we've all wandered down these places when we've had drink in us, but you only know yourself. There's a slight difference in it, and I have no doubt that being in these areas definitely have an impact on that 100%. And like you said about being a pilgrimage as well, like I've been going around to these places, and it's not as if I don't treat it with respect. I absolutely do, but I've been mind blowing with the experiences that have been happening to me every time I go to one of these places. I'm never expecting much. I'm expecting to go, feel nice energy, explore, have a beautiful day, looking around and stuff. But I'm always like left with my jaw dropped in a sense of actual physical things that have been happening to me. It seems to be getting stronger every time I go back to somewhere like this. I think it's either my mind is opening up more to it, the energy of the land kind of knows I'm coming and they start to put on a
yeah,
show. Sometimes, actually, a lot of the time is when I don't have my phone with me, the maddest of things would happen. And it's kind of like if I know if I leave my phone in the car, something strange will happen. So I kind of do it on purpose most of the time. But even just like the Lack on Scaldalm and like the one in Kilkenny, there was two cub foxes that came out to me before I went in there, and I never see cub foxes. And then I went back to the car, and I went closer to the cub fox, and it would run into the den. I'd walk back to the car, and they'd start kind of stalking me, kind of coming back out. And it's very
mm,
unusual behavior for a fox,
yeah,
cub fox, to do in the countryside. Anyway, maybe not so much in the city, but then going onwards from that, then it was the one in Four Knocks in Mead. Yeah, Mead, Fornox and Divine Valley. Anywhere in Divine Valley is magical, but this place, the energy hit us like a ton of bricks. It was myself and
mm,
Adam Tahari, a didgeridoo player, and the sound out of a didgeridoo, it sounded like that fort was made for it, really. I think these ancient sites, they're not just burial chambers, they're natural amphitheaters. You'll often
Yeah.
find ring forts the same. I think they're kind of built for sound vibration, and I think sound vibration had a much higher place in society back then, probably for ceremonies. For I know people have theories of sound being able to actually move heavy objects like dolmen stones or things like that, but I'd say there's also other ways to move them. But so we were playing music in there for a good hour, and I could see energy. Like, I've taken psilocybin mushrooms before, but it was so similar to the start of a psilocybin mushroom journey, what I seen from a completely sober mind dancing in front of me in this burial chamber. And like, I felt energy in many places. You kind of feel a coldness, something going down your spine. Even just looking at places will do it to you sometimes, but to actually see it from a sober mind, it was okay. Now I know that this is like 100% real. You know, I,
Mm.
I never really had much doubt beforehand because I'm always kind of in touch with that sort of a thing. But when you see the veil kind of coming into our world, that's a whole other piece of
Yeah.
evidence right there, you know. And like that, it kind of stuck with us, the two of us, for a few days after. We rang each other the next day, just checking up. How are you? Are you still feeling a bit strange after all that? And we're like, yeah, there's something else going on, and it's like a magnetic pull. Now I can't wait to go back to the next place, and I have 14 counties out of 32 done, so I have a good bit more than half left to do. So I'm so excited. I kind of want to savor them, and I just know once I go up to so. Do you know in Fermanagh, it's the Boa Island Heads in Fermanagh? I don't know if you've ever been there.
Mm.
It's
I've
like
never been there.
a representation of Crom Cruach, which is like an ancient serpent deity of Ireland, a kind of a dark sort of a god, but also has light. So it's a double-headed serpent, which is the statues. I think is one is masculine, one is feminine. But even the next day, I watched The Secret of Kells, which is a cartoon film about the
Mm.
Book of Kells. It was by Cartoon Saloon, the crowd in Kilkenny. They've many good films. So there was so much synchronicities about what I experienced about Crom Cruach, and it's like when you go to one stage of this path, the next stage opens up. He's like, okay, I need to go here next. I need to go. I learned something about this place that has a connection to this place, and it's kind of never ending. Like, I could stay circling Ireland for years, just going to all these places.
Yeah. I can relate to loads of what you just said. Like there was one instance when the Hill of Tara that was going back a good few years ago where I touched the shield in the gig on the way in, and the tour guide, it was just me and him, and he brought me in, and I had like profound energetical kind of experiences after that. Like it was just I was not right for about 2 weeks after that. I was up and down. So whenever I go to these places, it's never really something that I see. It's more about how I'm feeling, and
Yeah,
it seems to be the same always in all of these places. But there is one thing that I should mention about, and especially in terms of the book and in terms of the Brian Bruce story and how I feel so strongly kind of attuned to it, and also as well kind of giving Baru his due respect. I've actually visited almost every place that he's been in his life, from Inishfallen all the way up to his burial site in Armagh, and also everywhere in between, like the Mag Adar and stuff. And actually, there was one weird, and actually, there is something that happened, and I should mention this to you. And it happened in two different places, sorry, three different places, and it's all related to Baru. So where he got his name, where the family got the name, was actually because they were massive cattle lords. So his name Baru was Baruma. So it was actually a kind of derivative of the Gaelic for of the cattle tribute, right?
hmm,
So they were huge cattle lords. This is where they had their wealth. So they, in their place in Killaloe, they would have had like lots of cattle like being brought down to them. Like they were big cattle lords. And no word of a lie, the first time I visited Brian Boru's fort, I was in his fort. I did a live stream TikTok, and at the time I had about maybe 10,000, maybe 8,000, 10,000 followers. I had a huge. It was the biggest live stream I ever did. and it was in the fort, right? While I was there, I heard the cattle neighing from across the way, right? So I was saying to myself, okay, fair enough, we're in the countryside. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful to hear the cattle, like, mooing and
Yeah.
neighing or whatever. Or sorry, it's not neighing, that's a horse. Mooing,
Moving. Yeah.
whatever. So the cattle mooing, right? So you could clearly hear them from across the Shannon. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's perfect. That can happen, right? That's coincidental in the sense that we're in the countryside. We're in County Clare, like.
But that's the spot right there where they would have
Yeah,
been
at the
doing the
fort.
the port. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
water, they would have been taking tax probably at that spot because it was part of the Shannon
Exactly.
where. Yeah.
Right there. So I could hear the cattle moving across the way. So that day I went to the Rock of Cashel, and this is no word of a lie. Went to the Rock of Cashel and I was late, so I couldn't go in. I had already been in there the previous trip. But I went up and I climbed up and I actually walked along the walls and I actually got around to one side, and I swear to God, I couldn't believe it. Same thing happened. There was some sort of cattle mark right behind me. The same exact thing happened right there and then. It was like they just went like that. I
Yeah.
was like, what the fuck is going on? And then lastly, the last one, the Mag Adar in County Clare, where the Dalcassian kings were inaugurated. Sorry, not the I said earlier on the Munster kings, but it's the Dalcassian kings, the
Oh yeah.
Dalcash. This was their territory.
Yeah.
The sacred tree would have been there as well, and one of the high kings would have came down and cut it down. There's a whole story. But anyway, I was there and I was doing this I was messing around, even though I was kind of half like thinking I'm gonna, crown myself as the Dalcassian king, right? And as I went up onto the mound and I kind of crowned myself Dalcassian king in my own head, it was kind of like the Napoleon, the Joaquin Phoenix version of the Napoleon when he went up, grabbed the crown, and put it up. Now, I didn't have a crown, but I symbolically.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and this is no word of a lie. I swear down on this, right? It's not long afterwards, there was cows in the next field, and I have it on camera. They ran over. They ran over. Now, maybe it was a total coincidence or whatever, but I'm telling you, they just started sprinting. Now, this was afterwards, now maybe 20 minutes afterwards. They sprinted over from the other side of the field, right over to the fence, and were looking right at me. Now, is it all a coincidence? Perhaps. But for me, I was at 3 sites that are related and 100% associated with Brian Baruma of the Cattle Tribute. And at the 3 places, there was 3 significant events that involved cattle. So, fair enough, if that's a coincidence.
The magic number of 3 as well, of course, is kind of like a number of completion and the triskelion and lots of things like that. Is that where his name comes from? Like Bo as in a cow, Boru.
Yeah, Baruma of the Cattle Tribute. So, like the Brian Baru, so that in his lifetime he wouldn't have been known as Baru at all. Like in terms of Brian Baru, in his lifetime was Brian McKinetic, so he was Brian McKennedy. So technically, so the Kennedys have a lot to say about the O'Briens as well. The O'Brien came afterwards from the grandsons wanting to hold the name of Brian, because those surnames didn't exist at the time. But Baruma, I think he may have had the nickname, perhaps, maybe other, because he was one of the High Kings as well, which was a kind of a controversial thing about him, but that he brought the Baru tribute back because it was actually in the statutes or the whatever, the kind of, the whatever book. There was an old custom to give loads of cattle to the High King, and nobody had kind of instigated it until Baru came back. So he was a little bit controversial at that time.
He brought it back.
Yeah.
That was it. Like cattle were currency back then. They were kind of the best thing to have. Is kind of I wouldn't even say sacred, but they would have been very highly regarded animals back then, I'd imagine. And
wine, clothes, weapons, cattle,
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, they were the things. So it's like when he went
you get your leather as well from it, as well as clothing will come from
as well.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So his tent on the Battle of Clontarf would have been made of mainly leather hide. So the tents would be very thick and, very kind of well made, But like even when he went into the Viking ports of Limnach and Port Lorga, Waterford, and subdued them, his main concern was to kill the fighting men and keep the merchants. And he made deals with the merchants. He says, "You are now you vassal to me," essentially, like, so
Yeah,
he didn't wipe them out, like, you know what I mean? He kept what was, he kept the currency going. The
they're needed for
Vikings
the
were good.
economy, of course.
Exactly. The Vikings were good in one way because they kind of brought the outside world into, we were like, there's this ill-conceived notion that we were kind of not going to places in boats and stuff like that. We were going to places in boats for thousands of years. There's been evidence of that
Yeah,
for quite a
North
while.
Africa. They would have been the
Yeah,
earliest settlers of Ireland. I think were from North Africa. They would have been
interesting.
coming up from Egypt and
Yeah,
other parts. But that's why the Sanskrit language is so close to ancient Irish language. Manchán Magan talks about this a lot. But there's lots of words, and then they would have had a similar word for cattle as well. Actually, I think it's something that's close to bow. There's something there to do with the Milky Way, that it represents the goddess up there, and then the Kailak again is related to, is it Kali or something like that? It's like a blue deity in Indian Hindu kind of. So there's lots of similarities between different ancient cultures, of course, but it also shows that we were traveling, like you said, to bring it back to the main
yeah,
point there, that early Irish settlers were moving around in boats like that. Of course,
yeah.
Vikings are known for it, but I would agree that we were surely leaving the Ireland. I mean, Irish, it's in our blood to be kind of travelers anyway, to
Of
be
course.
exploring, like,
Yeah. Like Brendan, the Saints, they were just following on from the Druidic tradition. I think the Druids were going all over the place. They were going all
Yeah.
over. Yeah. But just one thing actually I forgot to mention about Gallstown as well. I actually, that whole trip and the Hill of the Hag and stuff like that has inspired me because there's an American guy got in touch with me. He wants to do like a certain type of film and and he's got on to me to write something. So that whole trip has inspired me to investigate, that whole mythology as well. So that's another thing. So I think that's where I kind of like. So I think what we're doing, I kind of was thinking about this beforehand, and you mentioned it earlier on. Your function and your abilities and your skill set is very specific, right? And I think it's absolutely essential in what you're doing. And then I have like a similar mission, but it's a different type of skill sets and function. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think is going to really bring us on as a culture and as a people, is that we all need to find our little place.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're not all the same, and we're not all doing the same things. We don't all have the same skill sets, but we all have our little part, to play in this, in telling the story. And actually, another thing that I don't know if you know about him, John Moriarty. Have you ever heard of him?
I
The
have,
Kerry
yeah.
philosopher. Have you read his stuff?
Is he the fella that was a priest? Is that?
He wasn't. No, that's John O'Donoghue, but they're
Oh
very
yeah, that's what
similar.
I'm thinking. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I probably have read
He,
bits and pieces. Yeah,
check out John Moriarty,
Moriarty.
Bobby. I think the reason why I'm saying it to you, and I highly, highly recommend him to you, because John Moriarty is a Kerry philosopher, North Kerry. He's inspired me greatly, right? And the reason why I'm saying it to you is because your work and healing the land is what he was all about. Like he
Mm.
literally put it into analogy of like, or a story of like, imagine, me say going to a psychoanalysis, right? Because I really need to heal myself. So what we need to do is I need to lie down on the couch, I need to go right back into my childhood, right back in to my earliest memories. As a culture and as a nation, as a people, we need to go back into the ancient myths and the folklore and heal ourselves and come forward. We can't keep focused on the 70s onwards. Like we can't keep
Yeah.
focused on famine onwards. We can't keep getting into the muck of the travesty that was colonialism, right? And we can't keep staying in there and fighting and
Perpetuating the
fighting.
suffering. Yeah, I 100%
Exactly.
agree. Yeah.
I could say like a few things, but I won't. But I don't want to be, some people, I think their place is just as important. But I think that's why we need all these different people doing this. And your work is very much going into the land and healing it and bringing your sound vibrations to it. And I think John Moriarty is going to be massive. He's got a load of stuff on YouTube free, loads of stuff that you can access immediately. He's going to be a huge inspiration for you.
I think I was listening to a podcast that a friend sent to me about him. I'm pretty sure it's the same guy because when you said Kerry, it was the Kerry accent that brought it to me. I'm pretty sure it was John Moriarty, and I loved what he was saying and doing. So I'm going to delve further into his work
Definitely.
now, 100%. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
feel like it's funny with me. I think if you're into reincarnation and stuff, I think the last time I was probably a human was back at those times. I feel like the Druidic times, kind of early pagan times, is where I find the most magnetic pull towards, the most interest in. But also, it's a time that I think the people of that time had a much better understanding of energy, and with
Yes.
that probably natural healing, and with that an understanding of emotions and the cosmos. And I think it was a time of
110.
wisdom. And you think back like, oh, years and years and years ago, people weren't that advanced. I think we were more advanced in other ways. We're more advanced now in the material ways, in our buildings or cars or whatever, but back then we had a better connection to nature, obviously, and a better connection to the energy of the land. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
kind of trying to draw out of what I do, is to show people that this is a place. We're not going back in time, we're not walking backwards to do this. This is something that's a constant. It's always there, it's always going to be there, and it's about time that we kind of open our hearts to it, accept it, and allow it to kind of channel through us.
Yeah, and then the last kind of thing I will say on the spiritual experiences of the ancient world, and it's very innate, and it's anybody can do this at any time, especially if they're in the dark sky reserves. And this is what it's all based on, essentially. For me, like those landmarks that we mentioned and stuff like that are all aligned with the night sky, with the cosmos. And
Yeah.
so anybody can go out to the beach, if you're down in Kerry or any other dark sky reserve, and go down, lie down on the beach on a summer's night, cloudless night, and just stay there for an hour or two. And if you come away from that and you say, sure, look, it's all meaningless, then that's
Yeah.
grand.
Yeah.
That's fine, that's fine. Like
Yeah.
that's literally that's maybe your function is to have that, uh, you know, uh, that maybe that's your function in life to
Yeah.
have that kind of message. But if you will, there's something's going for the most part, something will happen to you because you'll be looking at it and you're saying, how do I feel so close to us? Like that's how I
Mm,
felt when I was there. It's like, how is it that it's so vast and so far away, apparently, right? That how do I feel so connected to that? Like,
yeah.
why is it that I'm feeling a connection to this vastness and this expanse? And then there's all sorts of stuff going on in the sky which I don't understand. Like, yeah, I really don't understand, like all these comets and stuff like that. I just don't get it. Like, I'm just looking at it and I'm saying, how is this happening every night or most
Yeah.
nights or certain parts of the year? And I'm completely unaware of it.
When you're looking at it, like you're saying, how it feels so close, it's like there's just a wall that you can touch, and it's like the more you look
Exactly.
at it, the closer it gets. But
It
it's
gets,
all
yeah.
it's all of these stuff is within as well. You can actually like you can just go into a deep meditation, and like if you're used to meditating, you can actually travel the cosmos from going internally.
It's like a
It's
mirror
similar to,
almost.
definitely, but it's also similar to the earth. You can go,
Yeah.
so the stories of folklore of the Shi, they're underground. They're the other world is underground. It's in the wells, it's in the cairns, it's in the hawthorn trees. The portal to the other world is in the earth. You actually go inwards to go outwards sometimes, like that. So it's similar
Yeah.
to your own body as well, to meditate, and you go inwards and then you kind of get to explore the vastness of our reality in a sense.
A- and as well, you were mentioning earlier on about, like, where did this, like, how was I informed as a child around
Mm.
this world, right? So this whole journey of history, folklore, mythology started from me telling the story of Scotia's grave on TikTok in 2022, right? And I just told it for the Tralee audience, thinking that it was just them that would get it, right? But it was like a whole internet. It blew up like 600,000 views, blah blah blah.
Wow.
So that place, right, in the stories was where the Miletians defeated the Tuatha De Danann, and Scotia lost her head and was buried there, right? So that place, right, if you interpret it, that when the Tuatha De Danann were defeated, that kind of place, or that place signifies the time when they retreated into the mountains,
Yes. Yes.
or at least the beginning of it, right? So
Yeah.
this was the type of stuff that was informing me as a child. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this was like that place is like is almost one of the entry points into the other world. Like, so
Exactly.
yeah.
You should.
So when you were, yeah,
Have you been to? We're just in our last minute there now, but I want
yeah,
to ask you one thing quickly. Have you been to the caves of Kesh in Sligo? It would have
I
been.
haven't.
I highly recommend you go to those caves. It was the initiation place of the Fianna. Cormac McCart used to live there for a while as well. There's so much about it.
Oh,
There's so
wow.
many stories about it. We're going to have to do this podcast again because I think we
We
can
can
do
do it
this.
again.
We can do like part two because the conversation is fantastic. Unfortunately, the Zoom is going to its last minute,
Yeah.
so
Thank you
there's
so much,
probably
Bobby. It's been an
an
absolute
hour
pleasure.
there.
Go meet him out.
And look out, everyone, for Bertie Brosnan's book, The Forgotten Prince, about Brian Bruce novella. Is there anything else you'd like to add before you head away?
www.bertiebrosnanfilms.com. Everything is there. Reach out to me if you can't find anything, and I'll be more than welcome to facilitate you. Thank you so much, Bobby. Legend.
Cool, no bother. It was an honor and pleasure to have you, and I wish you the best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Take care.